Welcome to Forward Progress, the Monday edition where we've got an action-packed show today. We'll be telling you what we're over and underreacting to this week, injury news that you need to know about, and we'll preview the Monday Night Football game, so stick around for that. Forward Progress will have coverage every day, Monday to Friday, 2 p.m., including tomorrow, where I'll be joined by Sharp Clark, and we'll be doing some film review. And then Wednesday, you'll get Rob Pizzola, Eric Eager, Suma, and Hitman, and they'll be giving you their best bets and game-by-game betting previews. That's my long-winded way of saying you should really subscribe, hit the notifications bell so you don't miss any of the content. Also, smash the like button, show some love to the creators taking their time to provide valuable insights. Of course, none of this would be possible without our sponsor, Pinnacle. Pinnacle is the world's sharpest sports book and available to bettors in Ontario. Find out what professional bettors have known for the last 25 years. 25 years of competitive odds. Your trusted sports book. Bet smart, bet Pinnacle. Must be 19 plus in Ontario. Please play responsibly. With that being said, I'm your host, George Sofidis, and I'm excited to get this show on the road because I'm joined by Fabian Sommer, pro NFL bettor, creator at the Hammer Betting Network, and Cleve TA from cleveanalytics.com, creator at the Hammer Betting Network. Gentlemen, I am really excited to do this, and I wanted to start off with macro takeaways of what we thought of the week that we just witnessed. And Suma, I want to kick it off with you.
Man, first of all, I thought it was some real ugly football overall. So Chargers, Dolphins was probably a lifesaver when it comes to the entertainment value of the NFL Sunday. Lots of unders. Yeah, I mean, it's great to have the NFL back, but I could have enjoyed a little bit more scoring, a little bit more action, like some games, like we will talk about it, Falcons, Panthers, the Bears offense. Yeah, man, that was some rough stuff out there.
Yeah, we talk about like counter punches when somebody gives you something, a new look, and you got to figure out how to beat it. And I thought, okay, maybe we'll get a solution to the cover two that everybody's playing. And my takeaway is like, is good explosive offense dead for the most part? Or is this it? Are we back to low 40s football and we're going to have to get used to it? Cleve, what was your biggest takeaway from this week that we just witnessed?
Yeah, I mean, not to piggyback the same concept, but it has to be the scoring. I mean, we're looking at some historical numbers here. If you look at, obviously Monday Night Football pending, there's only 59 offensive touchdowns scored, this week one. And that is the lowest we've seen, except for, I think, in 2017, we're at 57. Otherwise, it's the lowest in like the last 10 years. And we're typically in the 70s and 80s. So we're not just a little bit under in kind of the norms. We're well under. You look at the yards per attempt for quarterbacks, just over 6 yards per attempt, which is the lowest that we've seen in any week one in the last 20 years. So just a tremendous amount of, underperforming from an offensive perspective. I think some of that is, again, the cover two issue maybe, but I think it's also just a lack of preseason for a lot of these quarterbacks. I've been talking about it a lot on my Twitter account, just, some of the data, we're seeing more and more of it each year. And there's more quarterbacks each year that are just not taking any snaps in the preseason, more than any other that we've seen. So I think that could have some of it because a lot of those guys underperformed. And just the weather. I mean, there was rain all over the place, and especially on the East Coast and the Midwest. In Cleveland here, that's where I'm based. There was not supposed to be any rain at all. It was supposed to be, the forecast was cloudy and maybe you get like a drizzle here or there, but it was a steady sideways rain for almost the entire game. And I don't think either team was prepared. So I think the combination of all of that really led to a depressed scoring output. But, I think in general, it was some fun football, and we saw some rookies, make some good plays, and there's some exciting action. I'm just glad that the football is back. So all in all, it was fun, but yeah, I'd be happy with a little more scoring.
Yeah, anyone who plays fantasy football is all too familiar about how bad the scoring was this week. Unders went 11-4 so far in week one. Suma, Cleve brought up a great point about the rust factor and guys who don't play in preseason and maybe they're not ready to go. Here's the thing. It's now in the public lexicon. Everybody's discussing it. And I wonder, is next year, are we going to see a situation where coaches realize, hey, we have to get some reps in during preseason football? Do you think we'll see more of these guys at least play a couple series in the preseason?
Maybe yes, but I think on the other side we can also argue like guys like Bryce Young, um, Kenny Pickett. I mean, there were quarterbacks who played in the preseason and just had a brutal showing on Sunday. So that might uh, take some coaches to point towards them, like, hey, look at the Falcons Panthers game. Those guys got a preseason series and they absolutely looked like trash in their first game. But yeah, in general, I agree with Clef. Like, there has to be something to it, right? So if you do not get any game action for like 8 months or so, or for like 9 months, there has to be something to it. Like, it can't just feel the same like when you stepped on the football field the last time. So there has to be something to it, I think.
Yeah, and I'm not, I would say that I don't think there's a direct correlation between you play more and you'll play better in week one. It's more of if you don't play at all, I think it does affect you negatively. So it's kind of just kind of the one side of the coin. Again, maybe it's circumstantial, but I only look back to like 2016 when only one quarterback or two quarterbacks were sitting in a preseason. Now it's like 8 to 10, and the numbers continue to get worse and worse. So I don't know. At the end of the day, is a trade-off of one bad week potentially, one rusty week. Is that okay if you prevent any injuries, season-long injuries for your most prized asset? At the end of the day, it might be okay. So I'm not sure if any coaches are really going to think the opposite, but you never know. We'll see if things change next year.
I'm curious to see what the outcome will be next year and how many will play. My other takeaway was, projecting second year QB leaps, maybe over a span of a season, but maybe not early in the season because none of them look like very good quarterbacks yesterday. I want to talk about overreacting and underreacting. Everybody says, it's overreaction week. And in fact, I'm getting tired of the phrase because I believe some things you have to react to. Sumo, what's something that you're overreacting to based on yesterday's results?
Overreacting. I mean, is Seattle maybe just bad and we were too high on them? So that was one of the thoughts that came to mind. For example, like, is Pittsburgh, is their offense the same old Matt Canada offense, and there is nothing from the preseason sticking going into the regular season? These are the kind of things that I was thinking about today in the morning. For example, I mean, I think where we cannot overreact too much or enough is like the Bears offense. I mean, like, all that hype all off season, like every Bears beat reporter, oh, this is our year. DJ Moore, Justin Fields finally has a weapon, second year in the scheme. He will finally break out after being like the worst passing quarterback in the entire league, like dead last in almost every significant metric that you use nowadays. And this week one, it was the exact same Bears offense from last season. There was nothing in the passing game. Everything was just horizontal, screens left and right. O-line couldn't hold up against a Packers front seven where Rashan Gary, I think, only played like 50 or 60% of the snaps. I mean, it was rough. DJ Moore, their new asset, had like two catches all game long. I mean, just a complete beating from the Packers, and the Bears are in a very rough spot. Like, when you have this hype all off season and you finally believe that after Aaron Rodgers is gone, you can now beat the Packers in week one, and you take such a beating, I think it's very hard for the city of Chicago to swallow.
I've got some thoughts on Chicago, but I'll save it when we're doing our game by game takeaways. I also wrote I have to adjust the Rams up and Seattle down. I was wrong on both fronts. The Rams are not the bottom three team that I thought they were. In Seattle, I don't know that they have a defense that can stop anybody. Cleve, what are you overreacting and underreacting to this week?
Well, I'll say I'm underreacting. You just mentioned the Rams. I'm not reacting at all to the Rams. I disagree. I think it was just a one-game blip. Like McVay has Pete Carroll's number. He always has. They clearly have a good scheme against that defense. But I'm sorry, I'm not Nakua, whatever the rookie that had 15 targets. Like the guy is not. I'm not fearful of that offense. Stafford looked really good, but he was not touched. He had no pressure at all. Seattle didn't even try and blitz him. They just sat in a soft zone and got picked apart, especially over the middle. I missed the move on San Francisco this morning. I was looking at taking that. I was hoping to get a 6.5. I missed it. It went up to 8. Like the smart guys already reacted to that one. But I'm not reacting to the Rams like you are. And I'll just say one thing, I think this is a Green Bay Packer Jordan Love podcast, right? Like we are all pretty sure. I know me and you and Jordan at least were high on Jordan Love and the Packers coming in. And, his EPA numbers were awesome. I think he was number 1 or number 2 on a per play basis. But, I watched that game. He was good. He was fine. He had a couple of big plays. He had a screen pass to Aaron Jones who took it. He did all the work and took it, 50 yards for a touchdown. There was another, drop. He dropped a shotgun and then recovered and found a wide open. I think it was Romeo Doubs deep. So, a couple of huge players were outliers to get them, to make his numbers look a lot better than they really were. His success rate was much lower than his EPA numbers. So I'm not going to overreact to Jordan Love, although I think he's going to be fine. And I think he was promising and I have high hopes for them. I'm not going to overreact and say, oh yeah, he's arrived and he's a top 10 quarterback just yet. So I'll cool my jets on that one for now.
Cleve, I had to adjust for the Rams because I thought they were a doormat, and they're not. Stafford is not bad enough that that they're going to be this punching bag. Even though, to be truthful, Seattle was the bigger take back for me. I'm like, I really don't like what I see defensively from this team. I still had San Fran. I made the line 9, and I too am mad that I didn't react on 7 because it's north of 7 now. Let's go game by game takeaway. Let's talk about some injuries. Let's start with what we saw last night. Dallas at the New York Giants Sunday night. Tyler Smith, their offensive guard for Dallas, never played. His backup, Chuma Edoga, left the game, and they had to go with their third string guard. If that persists, do you think that's going to be problematic? Because Leonard Williams and Dexter Lawrence, who are very good, did have some pressure up the middle. Chuma?
Oh, okay. I don't think it's going to be much of an issue because Tyler Smith has I think, low-grade hamstring strain, so he might even be back this week. So I think the Cowboys will be fine there. I mean, their interior, if all, is one of the kind of weak spots on the team in general, but I think they're going to be fine. I'm not too worried about that. I mean, that game, if I'm the Giants, I will just not watch the tape. I mean, what is there to look at? I mean, just move on, ignore that game. I mean, it was an absolute ass beating. Cowboys, we talked about it on the Wednesday show that, and I think we all had the consensus opinion that it's a very rough matchup for the Giants. And not only was it a rough matchup, but everything compounded once the Cowboys were leading 16-0 going to the second quarter. That game was over. Giants offensive line could not hold up anything. Micah Parsons, I mean, absolute monster. There was nothing for the Giants in this game to gain. Honestly, I don't think it changes my opinion on the Giants in general, because it was just the worst possible matchup with the Cowboys that they could draw all season long. And we knew that their offensive line will struggle. We know that their defense is not setting the world on fire, even though they also did not need to do too much stuff, because the Cowboys offense very calmed down in the second half, and Prescott and company basically just were chilling out there. But it was a game that the Cowboys defense took over from the beginning, controlled all game, and I don't think we can draw too many conclusions outside of Dallas being good, and we knew that before. And for the Giants, they just gotta move on. I don't think that my perspective on them changes after taking a beating from arguably the best team, or one of the best teams in the NFL.
Yeah, I think a game like this is where matchup handicapping is very important, because my raw numbers said Dallas favored by 3 wasn't that far off what I believe the number was. But from a matchup standpoint, Dallas was a disaster matchup for the Giants. You talked about the Giants O-line looking bad. Andrew Thomas, their star left tackle, also looked bad. He pulled his hamstring on the blocked field goal, and he looked diminished the rest of the game. There's a little bit of uncertainty around him. Cleve, do you think that's something that's going to linger? Even if he does play, he may not be at the same level.
Yeah, I feel like all these offensive linemen eventually they play through a lot of injuries, and so they're the ones that kind of tough it out more than any other position. But I clearly, if you're a tackle and you got to jump out, those the quick movements could re-aggravate something like that. So, definitely, and he's the mainstay on that line, and he played so well last year. They clearly need him. I mean, for me, the Giants kind of this is what they are. They had the same issue last year when they stepped up in class against physical teams like Philadelphia. They got blown out twice. This is not, like you mentioned, this is not a good matchup. And it was just a lot of fluky things. I mean, a blocked field goal for a touchdown and some other things. Those are kind of outlier games. We'll say they better win this game this week in Arizona, because if you look at their schedule, you're talking about in San Francisco, they play Seattle, then at Miami, at Buffalo, and then they get 2 more physical defensive lines in Washington and the Jets. Like, if they don't win this week, and you'd assume they would, although you never know, it could be a difficult kind of sandwich spot in between Dallas and San Francisco, but they have to win this game or this season is over. I mean, it's flat out over. It might be over anyway, because I'm not high on them, but the schedule at the beginning of the year is absolutely brutal. And if you don't have, Andrew Thomas, or if he's not healthy, that's, going to make it doubly difficult. And then on the Dallas side, I think Fabian's like me. I had Dallas going to the Super Bowl. That's my pick. So I thought that this is them. I mean, this is who they are. They're so talented, and they're going to make teams look silly like this a number of times this year. So it's kind of par for the course, but it was one of those where after the fact, if you didn't pull the trigger on Dallas, you kind of step back. So what was I thinking? That was just a clear kind of buy signal on Dallas. It was a clear matchup advantage. And, but it was an outlier game, but clearly, Dallas is a really good threat in the NFC.
All right. We mentioned this game briefly in our takeaways, Rams and Seattle. The Rams left the game healthy. Seattle left the game with potentially both their offensive tackles who may miss time moving forward. Pete Carroll went on Seattle radio. He said he's optimistic about first-round cornerback Devin Witherspoon returning this week, not so much about Cross and Abraham Lucas. I don't want to relitigate the game, but Cleve, I want your takes. If Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas don't play, is this team in trouble?
Yeah, absolutely. Once those guys left, the offense looked completely different. I mean, they were at least respectable. They had a nice first drive. They were up 13-7 at halftime, so it's not like they weren't moving the ball at all. And then once I think it was Lucas was hurt first, and then Cross, the left tackle, was knocked out with a toe injury. Everything just completely changed. I mean, Geno Smith had no time. He never went down the field. I mean, I can't remember a single pass more than 10 yards down the field in the second half. When both of those guys are out of the game, he went 3 of 6 for 9 yards and 2 sacks. I mean, he was pressured on half of his dropbacks, just an insane number. And this is a defense that only has Aaron Donald in the front 7. They have nobody else. So, Detroit has, Houston has Aiden Hutchinson. They've got, legitimate pass rushers. That could be a problem on the road. And we're already seeing the line reflect that as it reopened at a much higher number than the look ahead. So I think this definitely being factored into this price.
Yeah. At one point, the Rams had 20 points and Stafford had 200 passing yards in the second half before Seattle got their first down. That's how much of a difference the game flipped. Suma, do you have any takeaways from the game?
Not really. I completely agree with TA that I will not overreact to the Rams. I also think I have to rewatch that game later, but I also think that a lot of the efficiency from Matthew Stafford came on third down. So he was absolutely killing it on third downs, not being touched, like TA said. So
wide open too, like receivers, soft zone, found the hole.
Middle of the field.
Yeah, he was 11 of 17 on third down conversions. It was like pull your hair out. Like first of all, to get the 17 third downs in a game is a lot, and to convert 11 of them is even crazier.
They could not run the ball to save their lives. Like, I don't know where I read this today. I did not check the box score, but I saw that at some point, Cam Akers had 21 for 22 yards. Is that correct? So, I mean, they were absolutely getting stalled on first and second down, and then Stafford tore the defense apart. Yeah, I mean, they will miss Cooper Kupp sooner or later when they don't play against the Seattle Seahawks defense, but I'm not taking too much away from the Rams here.
All right, let's move on to Philly and New England. Cleve, Philly looks like they've lost Nakobe Dean for up to a few weeks, maybe longer. James Bradbury as well is dealing with a concussion. It'll be a quick turnaround to get him ready for the Thursday game. What are your thoughts of those injuries and any takeaways you got from watching this game?
Yeah, I mean, the Bradbury injury, especially on a short week, it doesn't look like he's going to play. It's, you don't have many days to recover from a concussion. So they're looking at, you got Avonte Maddox in the slot, and you got Josh Jobe outside. You also have Kaylee Ringo, the rookie out of Georgia. They're pretty weak after Slay and Bradbury, and that's kind of what happens when you have all these expensive defenders to go with Jalen Hurts making all that money at quarterback. Your depth really takes a hit, especially on the back end. So, that is a situation where when you're going up against a team like Minnesota who has multiple weapons, obviously Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, they could potentially take advantage of them. For the game itself, with New England, once they went up 16-0, I kind of shut it off on the side. It felt like they went in cruise control mode. Jalen Hurts, from all accounts, did not play well. And then obviously he fumbled that on that key third down late that gave New England a shot to win the game. But it was a little bit of a rusty, again, he was another quarterback, didn't play for whatever it's worth in preseason. So, maybe there's a little rust there, but, what's that? New offensive coordinator too. So, there could be some issues there from a rust standpoint. So we'll see. I think they'll be fine. But defensively without Bradbury, that can clearly be an issue where teams could take advantage.
Here's what I wrote as my takeaway. Jalen Carter, 8 pressures. Why did Seattle and Detroit pass on this guy? Suma, any takeaways from this game?
Yes. The middle of the field for the Philadelphia Eagles, like linebackers and safeties, is going to be a big, big problem throughout the season. Nakobe Dean, I don't know whether he's a downgrade in terms of pass coverage after playing like his first real NFL game, but he is going to be out for quite some time with a Liz Frank injury, I think. I think that Fletcher Cox also left the game, but I have not seen any updates on that. Garrett Bradbury left for the Vikings, and I mean, Bradbury had a solid season last year, and their backup Schlottman is, I would argue that it's a downgrade, especially against that interior pass rush from the Eagles. But like TA said, like, this Eagles defense is so vulnerable over the middle of the field. So Hawkinson and JJ, I mean, looks like a sneaky good matchup for the Vikings, but they got absolutely killed last year. I think it was also week 2 against the Eagles on the road where they got absolutely shredded.
Monday night. It was the Monday nighter that week.
Yes.
This week it's the Thursday.
Yes.
All right. Let's move on to my favorite game of the week, the Miami Dolphins at the LA Chargers. The injury story is one. Terron Armstead did not play, and my God, his injury report is going to be difficult to read all year because there'll be weeks where he won't practice all week and then he'll play or he won't. And you almost have to figure it out by Saturday. Suma, let's start with you, fellow rival in the AFC East. What was your takeaway watching Miami and the Chargers?
Yeah, so my takeaway is that the Dolphins should have absolutely scored a 40 burger on the Chargers. Like, especially early in the game, Tua left some meat on the bone with some, crazy underthrows. I was already saying to myself, oh, good old Tua is back. Like, underthrowing Tyreek Hill down the field. He also threw one pass like directly into triple coverage. Then they also had the fumble. I think it was in the first quarter, like right in front of the goal line. So, I mean, the Chargers defense and the way the Dolphins offense evolved throughout the game, like they absolutely deserved to put up like 45 points on them. I mean, Tua was a little bit shaky early on, but in the second half, he made some really, really throws where you have to pull out that dog meme. Like, I mean, some really, really great throws, some off-platform throws, some throws against pressure. And I mean, Tyreek Hill with that quick speed motion is such a cheat code. And it will be very interesting to see what defenses will find to attack that or to defend that, especially next week with Bill Belichick. I mean, Tyreek Hill with that speed motion. I mean, I don't know how you defend that.
There's not many teams that have the personnel to defend it, let alone come up with a scheme. I wrote the thing that would hold the Chargers from being elite in the offseason, I said, was that I don't think their secondary can stop any of the top passing attacks in the AFC. I still don't think that, and something's going to have to change. Cleve, what's your takeaway when you watch Miami and the Chargers?
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys hit all the main points. I thought Tua looked good, although he did like Fabian's mentioned, he missed a couple of deep ones, especially late, that could have scored even more. The Dolphins couldn't run the ball at all. They had the worst success rate in the NFL yesterday, especially they ran it on early downs, only 16 times, and they threw it 37. So it was definitely a pass heavy mix on early downs, and just a crazy 59% success rate on early downs throwing the ball, 54% first down rate. I mean, they were getting a first down almost or on more than half the time they threw it on first down. Just crazy. Tua's ADOT was almost 12 yards per attempt. He's just, I mean, he had all the time in the world and was pushing it down the field. Nothing, you can't really beat just throwing it up to Tyreek Hill when he's got one-on-one. So it was a fun game to watch. I mean, I'm clearly the only game that, had the fireworks offensively. So I don't know. I just think that, when Tua's hot, like they looked exactly like they looked early last year. It's just a matter of, can they make those secondary adjustments after, the defenses start figuring things out again? Can they counterpunch? And that's the key to them going forward is being able to keep Tua healthy and being able to counterpunch on those when defenses change things up. I mean, the Vic Fangio, defense was kind of as advertised in terms of keeping everything in front and letting the teams run, because the Chargers, who don't ever run the ball well, were awesome running the football.
Yeah.
I mean, just a crazy 67% success rate running the ball. Eckler was running for days. So, they'll clearly set back and make sure that they protect the deep throws, but they'll let you run. So, that's something to keep an eye on going forward with, a team like New England coming up, who's probably going to want to pound the ball.
I have a couple thoughts on Tua, and I'd like to take a minute to rant, if you may. When we talk about Tua and his abilities, I don't think enough is mentioned about his pocket presence. I think he is one of the best at moving up and around in the pocket, keeping his eyes downfield, still looking for the throw. At times it leads to an interception in the red zone, which happened. But I am actually tired of people pretending like Tua Tagovailoa is in the Kirk Cousins tiers of quarterbacks. He has been the top right of the chart for a year and a half since he's hooked up with McDaniel. We love to quote EPA per play when it fits our quarterback narrative, and then give Tua none of the credit on his. I am not putting Tua in the same tier as a Herbert or a Hurts or a Burrow, but I think you need to start the conversation with Dak and Stafford, and in that tier, the third tier of quarterback, and stop pretending he's Derek Carr and Kirk Cousins. That is my strong take. Do you guys, where do you guys stand on that? Suma?
To me, Tua is in that, like, I don't know, 11 to 14 range until I really see that kind of play that he showed yesterday over a larger sample size, because last season he had his best 4 out of 5 performances against like bad defenses like the Browns defense, Texans, Lions, Bears. Yeah. And then he completely evaporated against the Niners, the Chargers. So, I mean, if he shows that over a larger sample size, I will absolutely upgrade him.
What's the number you need? Because I find when Tua has one bad game, it's affirmation that he's not good. But when somebody else has a bad game, we give him the excuse. What is the sample size we need? He also had 2 concussions last year, right? His play dropped off at the end of the season. That should be expected, but what's the barometer? Because it feels like he's getting the most unfair barometer when we judge quarterbacks. And you got to remember, I'm not one of those crazy maniacs who think he's as good as Justin Herbert, but I believe he's in the Dak Prescott and Matthew Stafford range.
Okay, that's fair, but I mean, if you want to upgrade him at some point or put him in a tier above that, you have to make the case that if you put Matthew Stafford in this offense, would he play better than Tua? Because Stafford is also like a more creative thrower, I would argue, who is maybe willing to take a few more shots in terms of anticipation. So you would have to make the case that Tua would execute this scheme better than a guy like Matthew Stafford, for example.
I think Tua gets saddled as like this check down, safe quarterback. He's not. In fact, I think he takes too many risks. And that's why the odd turnover comes in. Cleve, I'm curious about your opinion. How good is Tua Tagovailoa?
I mean, it's a tough question because again, the system matters, and it's not coincidence that we've heard the same things about Jimmy Garoppolo, right? In the Niners system, it's just that's just the way it is because we've got multiple years of Tua pre Mike McDaniel in that system and Tyreek Hill, and he was average to below average, and then you get Tyreek Hill, you get the system, you get Jalen Waddle, and I'm not saying he's not worthy of kind of he's a good quarterback, like he's doing what he's supposed to do. And he's making the plays and going in the right direction. He's very accurate when he does. But like it's just hard to put him in that elite tier because if you just had an expansion draft and you put every quarterback, on the most average offense in the NFL, how would he produce? Like where would he fall? And I wouldn't say he's the top 10. I mean, he's just kind of he's an average to above average quarterback who, performs very well in this system. So I don't think it's a negative on him.
No, but like last year through 9 weeks, he was the number 1 quarterback in every metric.
As Jimmy G every year.
No. Jimmy G is very high at EPA per play, but I'm talking like the QBR, PFF grade. Has Jimmy G ever felt like he had this ceiling that Tua demonstrates from time and then?
No, you're right. But he's also never had Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. He's had more like George Kittle, more underneath guys. Again, I don't know where. Like, if you want to talk, would I rather have him or Dak? I'd rather have Dak. But if you want to, you can convince me he's in kind of that 12 to 15 range. I'm perfectly good.
I have 18 weeks to convince you guys. By week 18, we're all going to be president of the Tua is Elite fan club. Let's move on to the next game. Las Vegas at Denver. We'll start off with Suma. Vegas had some injuries. Jacoby Myers left the game. Trayvon Moehrig left the game. Greg Dulcich left the game. Caden Stearns, their safety's out for the season. What are your overall takeaways from Las Vegas and Denver?
From a Broncos point of view, that offense felt a little bit better than last year. But I mean, I need to see like 3-4 more games of Russell Wilson really progressing not towards his Seattle peak self, but towards like an average quarterback or something. Because I mean, yes, yesterday it looked a little bit better. He was a little bit more on time with his throws than last season, but that offense still didn't look good at all. I mean, they had a lot of issues blocking Max Crosby, especially on right tackle. I think Garrett Bowles is also not at 100% recovering from the season-ending injury last year. But I mean, I also think they desperately need Jerry Jeudy back to give their offense like one more good route, one more explosive element. Javonte Williams also not at 100% yet. Is on a snap count basically. And I mean the Raiders, yes, they only won by 1 point, but I felt a little bit surprised about that offense, to be honest. Like Jimmy G played very decently, and he made some big dog plays at the end of the game, like rushing for the first down after getting absolutely drilled earlier on. I mean, kudos to him. I think I found it very funny that Jacoby Myers was basically his go-to guy. I mean, Devontae Adams had a tough matchup against Patrick Surtain, no doubt about that. But Jacoby Myers really already in his first Raiders game emerged as a very important weapon. Now they lost him. After that concussion, he might be out for even 2 or 3 weeks. We will see. But yeah, I mean, the Raiders, I was a little bit positively surprised, even though they only scored 70 points. But it was a tough road game at Denver in September.
I wrote, is Josh McDaniels an underrated play designer? Because I still think he calls good offense, even though as a head coach, he makes some head-scratching decisions. Cleve, what was your main takeaway from this game?
Yeah, I'm glad Fabian mentioned Jacoby Myers, because it was like every third down he was converting. That was definitely Jimmy's go-to guy. So I thought he was really critical. So if he's, he got hit, it would have been a fourth down, and it would have been an interesting play or play call for Josh McDaniels, whether to go for it or punt it back to Denver with a shot to win the game. But they called that, he went helmet to helmet. Kareem Jackson did, and so he was knocked out. So I think that's going to be a key going forward, because he's clearly his security blanket. Got those, I guess, that New England connection with McDaniels, so they know the offense pretty well. But I think the other surprising thing for me was Denver's defense was not nearly as good as it was last year. I knew it would be a little drop off from Evero, but Evero, the DC, left for Carolina. But they just didn't show anything. They had no pass rush at all. I don't think Jimmy G was touched. The Raiders were the only team in the NFL to get either a first down or a touchdown on every drive. So every drive that they started, they got at least one first down. Felt like they had the ball all game long. I mean, Jimmy G threw an interception in the end zone. Could have been a lot worse. But I think the back end, obviously Patrick Surtain's great, but they don't have much else outside. Denver does from a cornerback position, and they have no pass rush. I didn't see anything. No Randy Gregory, no Zach Allen. So, they definitely have to clear that up, or they're going to be in trouble. I mean, you can only do so much offensively with this team, especially without Jerry Jeudy. They really need him back, because, Cortland Sutton's not really a big play threat anymore, and they don't have anybody else. Marvin Mims barely got any snaps, which I was surprised at. I thought he would run, he would be running with the ones, but he was barely in the game. So I'm not really sure where they go for offense here. And if you're not going to move the ball against this Raiders defense, I'm not sure who you're going to move it against. So they may be another kind of just continue to fade their team total unders, because I don't know what they've done offensively besides just add Sean Payton that looks any different from last year.
Yeah, I think they need Baron Browning back in the worst way. He's on the IR for the first 4 games, and he could help out their pass rush. But yeah, I'm gonna wait till I see Jerry Jeudy's return. But I don't like this offense, and I'm starting to question if we ever see any version of Russ coming back. Let's move on to Green Bay at Chicago. Green Bay didn't have Christian Watson for this game. Aaron Jones played very well, but he also left the game, and it sounds like it might be a 1 or 2 week injury. Quay Walker left the game for Chicago. Kyler Gordon left the game. Cleve, let's start with you. What was your takeaway on Green Bay and Chicago? Oh, Suma, you want to start us off with Green Bay and Chicago?
Yes. I mean, we talked about it briefly at the beginning. Bears looked like the same team on both sides of the football as last season, like the exact same team. And Green Bay, they look pretty good on offense. I mean, it was the Bears defense, it was the Bears offense. Yes, we have to take this into account. They will face some tougher competition down the road. But what I felt was, and that's something that a lot of tape guys have been mentioning like all offseason long, this offense with Jordan Love, I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination that Jordan Love is anywhere close to a quarterback that Aaron Rodgers is, but this offense feels more cohesive when he is under center. Like all the under center play action stuff that Aaron Rodgers does not want to play for whatever reason, like it just feels like the run game and the play action game is a little bit more tied together, like more cohesive. And it feels like Matt LaFleur is finally in his bag, because he has a quarterback that will run everything that he calls, that he writes on the play call sheet, and that might be the difference between Jordan Love and Aaron Rodgers, even though there's nothing to argue talent-wise.
Well, Cleve alluded to it earlier. Jordan Love had a really good EPA per play, even though the success rate wasn't as high. I love 15 completions for 245 yards. I like that he's willing to take some shots. It looks like this offense has an element of being explosive, albeit the Bears defense is terrible. This might be Matt LaFleur's masterpiece on his way to a coach of the year if this continues. Cleve, what's your takeaway from Green Bay and Chicago?
Yeah, I talked about the Love, not necessarily efficient, but, hit the big plays where it was needed. And again, he was 19th in PFF grade yesterday, which is kind of where, when you kind of model out, can Green Bay make a run for the division or make the playoffs? Like, that's perfectly fine, right? I mean, that's kind of where he should be. Hit the big plays where is necessary. I thought that, Matt LaFleur did a really nice job getting Aaron Jones involved in the pass game. I suspected that would be the case. I think he's a really valuable kind of a guy to have out there for a young quarterback. I'm hoping I saw earlier that, his comments where he could have gone back into the game with that hamstring issue is just a, small tweak, but that's one of those things you got to keep an eye on. And he's a guy who has those tweaks from time to time, but he's a very valuable piece. And when they get Christian Watson back, like maybe they are just going to be the type of team that, runs the ball, gets the short passes to Jones and, Musgrave, and then just takes the occasional deep shot. And that's all it takes. When you look at their opponents this year, they got a really easy schedule from an opposing defensive perspective. And, this might be all it takes for Green Bay to win the division. So, I was just happy with how they kind of handled Jordan Love, how they, called the game, kind of gave him easy plays, and, he made those plays, and that's all you can ask for.
My takeaway for Chicago was I didn't like the Matt Eberflus hire when they did it. I don't like when a defensive coach is hired and he doesn't have any fingerprints on the defense. It doesn't look like they're improving. And I think it's actually detrimental to someone like Justin Fields. And I'm questioning whether this whole regime is going to be here in a year or two. Let's move on to Arizona at Washington. For the most part, everybody came out healthy from this game. This was an ugly game. Cleve, you're familiar with Arizona's coaching staff, so I want to start off with you here.
Yeah, I mean, you had to listen for, the last couple of months piling on how bad Arizona is and how they're trying to lose. And, Washington's going to, mop the floor. And, I always kind of had the take that, they weren't intentionally trying to lose. There's a lot of reasons that go into that. And they were just trying to clean up their cap space and get a good locker room and, acquire draft picks. And this was kind of all part of the reset, but it wasn't a clear tank. They have, different than other teams in the past, like Houston and Jacksonville and some others that were trying to lose because they didn't have a quarterback. They actually do have a franchise quarterback. Whether you think he's worthy of that money, it's a different story, but it's not like they're barren there. They've got a guy who can certainly be their future if they don't get the number 1 or number 2 pick. So they're not trying to lose. And I thought that they would play hard. They have a lot of young guys, especially on defense. So I had a good feeling that they would at least be feisty, and their defense really showed up. They, Jonathan Gannon, who got criticized a lot in Philadelphia because he wasn't very aggressive. He sat back a lot with the Eagles. He hired a really young 30-year-old whiz kid out of it was the Eagles linebacker coach, Nick Rallis, to run the defense. He's letting him run that defense, and he got a lot more aggressive yesterday. He blitzed a ton, way more than they did in Philadelphia. So you're going to see a feisty defense. I think you're going to see guys play hard. The offense was kind of as advertised, pretty ugly, with Josh Dobbs barely in the he doesn't even know half his teammates' names apparently yet. So they couldn't really manufacture much, but they played a tough defense. So we'll see what happens against the Giants this week. But I think you're going to, the market tends to overreact really early to bad teams like this. We've seen it in the past where teams that are supposed to have the lowest win total come out and cover week 1 or almost win week 1. And this happened again. So we'll see how it goes going forward. But I think you'll see they may not win a lot of games, but you'll see some games where they're going to be pretty feisty.
I was genuinely surprised how much pressure they generated. We all were kind of bearish on Washington's O-line, and might be justified. Suma, what was your takeaway when you see a game like this?
I mean, I only watch it on Red Zone, and I will watch this game in the 40 version at some point during the week, but I would love it if I hadn't to. I mean, what was concerning watching that game on Red Zone is the combination of that offensive line of Washington and Sam Howell like bailing out very quickly, like getting happy feet. And I think that might be a recipe for disaster medium term, because that offensive line going into the season was a bottom 5, bottom 6 unit, and they at some phases in the game they had no business blocking that Arizona pass rush. So yeah, that's something to look at. I doubt that from a talent perspective, this Commanders offensive line can get any better soon. So that's something they have to live with. And every strong defensive line, which might be even better than Arizona's one, will probably be a tough matchup for Washington.
Dallas is going to just rack up 25 sacks on their 4 games against Washington and the Giants, aren't they? Let's move on to San Fran and Pittsburgh. Some injuries came out of this game for Pittsburgh. Cam Hayward left the game. Deontay Johnson, DeMarvin Leal. Cleve, this was an ugly game, and Pittsburgh never looked like they were in it. Before the first 4 drives in sequence of the game were 3 and out by Pittsburgh, San Fran touchdown, interception Pittsburgh, San Fran field goal, 3 and out Pittsburgh, touchdown San Fran, 3 and out Pittsburgh, field goal San Fran. Before Pitt even got 1 first down, they were down 20-0 and the game was essentially over. It's when I stopped paying attention to it. Cleve, how do you take away anything from a game like this? Because Pittsburgh was supposed to be competitive and money came in on Sunday morning towards Pittsburgh. People believed that they were the right side on this game.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny because this was the underdog darling of the offseason. Everybody was picking Pittsburgh. I mean, the Circa Millions contest, they were like a top 5 pick, which you rarely get with an underdog, and is kind of a proxy for kind of the general public, and just a lot of people having high hopes. I saw some people pick them to make the Super Bowl, which obviously was off of a hot preseason, which we should never do. That's kind of a lesson learned. Same with the Giants, the 2 teams that looked the best in preseason, got the most hype. Clearly fell on their face. But a couple of things of note, one major injury, Cam Hayward, he left the game early, the defensive tackle for Pittsburgh. And I watched kind of the condensed version of the first half today. And once he left, he only played a few snaps. San Francisco ran right up the gut on him. And they just didn't have anybody. They have no depth in that interior D line, and they had nobody to stop. Their linebackers are poor to begin with. So it wasn't a great combination. But, otherwise, I think, the one thing Kenny Pickett did well last year, and it's not sustainable, it's very reminiscent of Carson Wentz when he won, he was kind of that MVP level season outlier, was he was struggled in early downs last year down the stretch. But what he did on high leverage situations, he used his feet to get first downs. He converted on a lot of these 3rd and 4th down opportunities. And I think he was top 3 in the NFL the last 10 games of the year. And I think that kind of lulled a lot of us to sleep into thinking that he was ready for the leap. In the game yesterday, he wasn't even coming close to that. On late downs, 25% success rate on 16 3rd and 4th down throws, minus 0.96 EPA, just atrocious numbers. He had no shot. And their early down rush success was horrible. They were 0 for 6. So when they tried to run on early downs, they couldn't do anything. And then when they got into third and long, they had no shot either. And that's how they converted last year. So they're going to have to do something to get, a little bit more on early downs. Maybe Matt Canada can figure something out. I'm not sure if he can, but that was the thing that was pretty startling, is that, they couldn't do anything. They couldn't do anything on early downs. They couldn't do anything on late downs. And they definitely need Cam Hayward back against Nick Chubb in this Browns run game. And they got to figure something out to get some easy throws, some easy layup yardage for Kenny Pickett on early downs, or they're going to be in trouble. And Deontay Johnson's hurt too. Yeah. He left the game. So, they're going to have to figure something else, because otherwise their offense is just throw the ball up to Allen Robinson and George Pickens and hope that they get contested catches, because those guys aren't going to separate.
Yeah, Suma, Pittsburgh's defense also didn't look good. And I know a lot of us were thinking that they had a pretty good defense this year. Like San Fran comes out their first 4 drives, they score on every single one of those drives. Ayuk looked uncoverable and looks like he might be becoming the guy there. What was your takeaway when seeing a game like this?
So I was not that high on the Pittsburgh Steelers defense to begin with, because I don't think their secondary outside of Minka Fitzpatrick is very good. Like, you have Levi Wallace and like 30-something-year-old Patrick Peterson defending Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. That's also why I had a play on the over, which I really liked, which came not to fruition.
San Fran did their part. You just need a little bit from Pittsburgh.
Yeah, just a little bit. Like one of those scoring drives before half or before the end of the game would have been sweet. But yeah, it's also not just Deontay Johnson hamstring pull, and every time a player like grabs his hamstring and struggles to properly walk down the field, I feel like this is not a 1 week issue, but he might really miss next week and maybe even 2 weeks. And Pat Fryermuth is dealing with a rib contusion, so I would guess probably like 60-40-ish that he plays next week, because it's very painful. So yeah, Pittsburgh, I was completely disappointed by their offense, and without Deontay, who is in my opinion a very underrated receiver in this league, and Pat Fryermuth is, I mean, could get ugly pretty soon. And Matt Canada, he was horrendous last year, but I thought like he might in some capacity evolve, but nothing there. I mean, like everything looks so static with this offense. Like you don't have the feeling that there are route combinations that play off of each other or something. Like everything looks so static and weird, and I don't know what the big solution to that problem would be in the short term.
Mike Tomlin's gonna have to fire off some motivational speeches to turn it around. We can't get to every game, but I have 2 more games that I want to talk about, especially this one because we're on opposite sides, I believe, amongst us 3. Tampa Bay at Minnesota. Minnesota, Marcus Davenport shows up as a surprise inactive with an injury, and Garrett Bradbury leaves the game. All right, let's start off with you, Cleve. Baker Mayfield used to be your quarterback. Where did you come down on this game before, and what was your takeaway after?
Yeah, I had a good amount on Tampa 6.5 and had some money line as well. So both hit. Obviously, there was some late. I mean, there was money all week on Tampa and got down to 4. And I know Sumo was on. I think he liked the Vikings at 4. And clearly, I mean, the Vikings outplayed Tampa. So there's no doubt that they should have won. It felt like at the end of the day, with a couple of those turnovers and things that happened late, that it's like everything that Minnesota, they caught all those breaks last year to win those games late. That's a game they would have won last year, and this year it's kind of natural regression that flipped. Yeah. So there's really not much to say here. Baker Mayfield was okay. He wasn't terrible, but he wasn't great either. The Vikings, blitzed, not shockingly with Brian Flores, blitzed a lot. I think they are either number 1 or number 2 yesterday in blitz rate. And Baker was he was just okay. They never got there. That's the thing. Like they blitzed a lot, but they didn't get much pressure on Baker. And, some of that is just the personnel that Minnesota has. And, they don't have, the good corners out there anymore. So he was able to make some plays when needed. They caught them one time and got Mike Evans on a wide open post pattern for a touchdown. So, that's what's going to happen to Minnesota this year. It's tough to run that Brian Flores kind of all out blitz defense when you've got these quarterbacks on an island. You got guys you've never heard of playing outside on an island, and it's going to be trouble against teams that can stretch the field on them. So that's something I'm going to keep an eye on all year. But I mean, offensively, Kirk Cousins looked good. Jordan Addison looked awesome. I thought he was really, really good. They're going to be an over team. I actually think this is the fact that it was 20-17 was a little misleading. I think it should have been, a much higher scoring game. And I think that, Minnesota tends to be more of an over team here going forward.
I remember Tampa's first 4 drives, they ended up with 1 field goal, and it happened to be on a turnover generated in Minnesota's territory, and they got 6 yards before settling for the field goal. I remember turning to my betting partner. I'm like, why the fuck are we always on Baker Mayfield? It seems like every year, and we have to rely on this guy, and we need him. And I'm like, what is wrong with us? We're gluttons for punishment.
I will say real quick, George, the one thing he did do well, like he evaded the rush when he needed to. He actually scrambled and got out of some sack situations. I think Tom Brady would have taken a sack or just thrown the ball away. Little things that like just being able to extend a play here or there that Brady just didn't. I mean, I don't blame him at his age. He didn't want to take any hits last year. So everything was just out quick. They couldn't get anything down the field last year. So, and he didn't, create any turnovers. There was no turnovers on his side.
That was my
kind of
word.
did what he was supposed to do. They've got a good defense. They got good enough defense, and he just has to not screw up. And so, they're kind of, to me, I thought they were a little bit under the radar going into this season. I thought they were being talked down too much as like a bottom 5 or number 1 pick candidate. I never saw that. And it's because the defense is just good enough to elevate them, and they've got enough weapons to, make some plays and win games like this. They're not going to win a lot, but they're destined for 7 or 8 wins.
Yeah, I wrote Tampa still has a really good defense that will keep them in games against middle of the pack rosters. Suma, what were your takeaways for this game?
Yeah, I'm not sure that Minnesota deserved to be covering -4, which I had, but I was screaming when I saw these like 2 muffed snaps, like one muffed snaps where the white guard disrupted Kirk Cousins taking the snap, which was pretty weird, and I don't think I've ever seen before. And then the goal line, basically, it was a dropped interception because I think it was KJ Osborne who basically had the ball already, and then some Tampa defender basically grabbed that ball out of his hands. Was a pretty disturbing phase of the game. But yeah, in general, I think this is, like Tia said, this is how the Vikings defense is going to live all season long. Like, bring the heat, try to create some turnover variance because they know they don't have the bodies in their secondary. And the Vikings offense, I don't think I can really criticize them outside of some stupid mistakes. I think Jordan Addison deserves to play more snaps than KJ Osborne going forward, which was like a, 35-25 kind of split or something. Jordan Addison looked really explosive. I think the offense will be fun going forward. I also agree that they look like an over team in general. And yeah, a tough road game next Thursday at Philly.
All right, let's look at one more game this week, and then we'll get people prepared with 4 or 5 games that have had market movement early. Cincinnati at Cleveland. This was not competitive. Cleveland was in control the entire game. They didn't, even if they didn't look good offensively at times, their defense looked fantastic. Nick Chubb still looks like the best running back in football. But Cleve, they lose Jack Conklin, their starting tackle for the year. And a guy who I was high on in the draft, DeJuan Jones, I was surprised he got to Cleveland in the 4th round. I heard there was some character issues. That wasn't a talent thing that dropped him to the 4th round. It looks like he's going to have to start. Do you think that's going to be a big issue?
Yeah, he played really well in the preseason. In the Hall of Fame game, he played in every single snap in the opener against the Jets. He played a lot of snaps for the rest of the preseason, held his own. I don't think he allowed a sack. Yesterday, he played 52 snaps at right tackle, didn't allow a single pressure, was graded very highly by PFF. So clearly, good signs. This is going to be a really tough test going in Pittsburgh on a Monday night with the crowd noise, and he'll probably be on a silent count. So we'll see how he does against the quickness of TJ Watt. But I mean, he's a mountain of a man. So it takes a lot to get around him. So he's going to use that to his advantage, hopefully. But from all accounts, I'm not an offensive line expert, but a lot of the technique guys, Joe Thomas and some others, have commented on Twitter about his technique looks really, really solid. So we'll see. I mean, he played well in preseason. He was he could have been a 1st round pick if he didn't have the weight issues and some of the off the field stuff. And he's played well in preseason in 1 game so far. So it's all good things. So I think on that end, the Browns should be okay in the long term for the rest of the season. I'm not, like I said, Monday night might be a different story because that's a huge test. Yeah. But in the long run, I think they should be okay.
Let me ask you then, before I go to Suma, talk about the Bengals woes. I want to talk about Deshaun Watson, and man, he's skipping some balls. Like he's leaving a lot of throws short. It reminded me of McNabb at his end in Philly, where he left everything short, throwing at everybody's feet. Are you concerned about your $260 million man at quarterback, Deshaun Watson?
Yeah, I was commenting on it too because like every throw was short, every throw was skipping, and it was like, does he have a dead arm? But to be fair, so like I said, in Cleveland was not supposed to rain yesterday at all. It was supposed to be just cloudy and, like I said, maybe a drizzle, like a very light drizzle here or there, and it rained the entire game. So I don't think either team was prepared. Equipment wise, I don't think they had the right cleats. A lot of guys were slipping. They weren't getting, him and Burrow were both. They couldn't hold the ball. I think Burrow used a glove in the second half, so they couldn't grip the ball. It was just ugly. So I'll give him a pass there. And to be honest, the second half he started completing those throws. He was a lot better in the second half, so maybe he was able to change his equipment at halftime. So again, it's so funny because he's played 3 home games since he's been a Brown. He's had that rain, kind of that driving rain rain yesterday. He had 0 degrees and 40-mile-an-hour winds against the Saints, and then he had snow and cold against the Ravens. So he's had 0 luck from a weather perspective. I guess you're going to get that in Cleveland, but he hasn't even had moderate good weather. So I want to see what he looks like with decent weather first. But in general, he hasn't been great. I mean, he does use his legs very well, and you combine that with what they did with Nick Chubb. They were just good enough offensively, and their defense was. I mean, it's not a hyperbole. Like this could be a top 5 defense. They have maybe the second best defensive front, maybe third best if you count Philly and San Francisco in the league. I mean, those guys were all over the place, and Jim Schwartz was just on it, in his bag, as they say. He's blitzing a ton, way more than what Joe Woods blitzed last year. He was moving Myles Garrett into kind of a middle linebacker position on passing downs on third down. Like just a lot of the cool things he was doing defensively, creating pressure, and just Joe Burrow had no chance. It was pretty startling to see how he was like, it was either dump off, take a sack, or just throw like a Hail Mary fade to Chase or Higgins, and just nothing was working. So you got to give the Browns credit. I don't know if they can do that all year long, but they were really good.
All right, so Suma, divide the pie of blame on Joe Burrow's lack of success. You got weather, you got rust, you got Cleveland's great defense. How are you dividing that pie on why Joe Burrow had 6 first downs the entire game?
Wow, I would say like 30% his calf, 20% rust, 35% Cleveland's defense, and 15%, if my math is right, the weather in Cleveland. I think someone mentioned on a podcast that they went like every single snap was shotgun. They did not even try to run anything under center, which might be a sign that his calf was not 100%, or maybe they didn't want to risk anything. But the combination of bad weather, rust, calf, and Myles Garrett screaming off the A-gap was, I think, way too much for that offense to handle.
Yeah, I know that if Tua had that game, we would 100% blame Tua sucking on that performance. I made a joke to Rob Zola. He talked about New England being a really bad team and maybe having this low floor, and I said, Bill's good for 5 or 6 wins, and then he'll pray to the rain gods in a couple games against really good teams, and the weather will help him. And sure enough, this was a weird weekend. I wasn't preparing for weather, and 3 or 4 games actually had weather we had to deal with. Let's move on now to this week's games, and we'll focus on the lines that are really already moving. The Houston Texans opened up as 1.5-point favorites to 2-point favorites. The line's completely flipped now. Indy's the favorite. I don't know if that's driven by Anthony Richardson being cleared, or if it's just, hey, you guys lined something bad. Do we continue to see Indy money? Do you guys think we might get this thing all the way up to 3?
I think on the one side, it's very early, and I would not be surprised. I mean, there's the general consensus opinion that Anthony Richardson looks like most ready among all rookie quarterbacks because of Shane Steichen and the scheme and his floor as a runner. But I mean, this is a game in week 2. The Colts offense, I mean, they had that one good drive, but other than that, I think they had 2 return touchdowns, when I remember correctly. And there was not really that much to get excited about offensively. So this is a matchup in week 2, 2 rookie quarterbacks where we don't know too much about. I would not be surprised, and I'm saying this on Monday evening, and a lot of stuff can change throughout the week. I would not be surprised if this bounces a little bit around pick 'em, like Houston dogs, Colts dogs, because as of right now, I'm not seeing the strong case for the Colts here.
All right. Cleve, what about Seattle, Detroit? We talked about how this thing was a 2.5 and look ahead, and then it opened 5.5, and it looks like it's gone to 6 with the question of Seattle's offensive tackles. Is this where you think it's going to keep going, or do you think there'll be some buyback on Seattle?
Is he muted again?
Yeah, Cleve, you're muted. All right, Suma, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very strong move. I mean, let's look at the Lions history right now. So this has moved straight towards -6, -115 at some spots. So strong move on the Lions. I mean, yes, Seahawks looked completely lost on both sides of the ball. Both starting tackles might be out, but looking at this number, and I need to do more work on this game, but crossing 6 towards 6.5 seems to be a little bit rich at first glance.
Cleve, do you agree with that?
Yeah, sorry about that. I didn't realize I was muted. Yeah, first thing, I would be on the floor if that Colts gets to 3. You would find me on the floor. I actually think Colts should be I thought this would be Colts -1. That was, I think Richardson I just saw got announced that he's going to play. Yeah. Or he would have gone back in the game. So that maybe that's what it was. But yeah, there is no chance in hell this goes to 3. You can quote me on that. But I think the Seattle game, I think 6 is the floor. Yeah, there's no way. I think all of the money on Detroit was based on the tackles not playing. So even if you assume both are out, like there's no way. I mean, the look ahead was 2.5, 3 to get to 6 is a pretty extreme move. I will say last year these teams played, and I know I was on Seattle. I think it was like week 3 or 4. I think that line closed at 4, maybe 3.5. It was like 4.5, 5 all week, and then went down to like 3.5. So, it's hard for me to imagine this would get past 6. I think that's definitely the cutoff. So, but if I had to guess, it would probably linger in this area, and then I could see Seattle taking money late, maybe late in the week, and this thing closes at like 4.5 or something. If I had to guess.
All right, let's talk about the game I didn't want to talk about, but the line's already moving, and I guess this morning's line was a little bit too good to be true. Baltimore and Cincinnati looks like they're in between 3.5, but I think this thing will continue to rise, especially now that the news is out that Ronnie Stanley and Tyler Linderbaum look like they are week to week, and Marcus Williams looks like he's going to miss some extended time. They lost J.K. Dobbins. Suma, do you just expect one-way money on Cincinnati here for a while?
Yes, for now. I mean, losing Ronnie Stanley is huge. Losing your starting center is huge. We don't know whether Mark Andrews is going to be back. I would argue that it's probably in the 50-50, 60-40 kind of range. Yeah. Marcus Williams, one of the best safeties in the game, is out. I don't even know what exactly he has. I think it's a pectoral injury.
Torn pec, but they don't think it's a season ender. They think he may be able to make it back at the end of the year.
Yeah, they're still deciding on whether to go for surgery. Marlon Humphrey is still out. And yeah, I mean, that looks like not the greatest matchup for the Ravens on paper for now.
Yeah, Cleve, needless to say, I was floored when I saw the opening line. Do you think we're just gonna get bombarded with Cincy money here?
I don't know. I mean, I think Baltimore is enough. I mean, Lamar Jackson has enough respect in the market to keep this, within 3.5, 4 tops. I would be surprised if it would go above that. But I think 3.5 is probably the right number. I think, like me and you, when we saw 3s right away, we're thinking Cincinnati, but I think 3.5 is probably the right number. just because of the respect for Lamar. But yeah, those injuries in the secondary, that's brutal against this team that you'd expect, after looking so horrible in the first week, that they would come out firing in week 2. And, that pass rush that was kind of non-existent, that we all thought was non-existent coming in, they did a really nice job, pressuring a rookie in CJ Stroud. I saw 25 dropbacks he was pressured on, 25 out of 54 dropbacks he was pressured. So a significant amount, but I'm not sure you can do that against Joe Burrow the same way you did that against a rookie who can't recognize those things. And, Stroud did a nice job getting out of some of those would-be sacks, but, all in all, that defense just isn't as good as it used to be in the past. So I would be surprised if there wasn't a lot of points in this game, and, Cincinnati is the clear advantage.
I'm noticing a lot of unders got bet early in the market this week, so the under train might continue from professional bettors. Let's look at Monday Night Football, Buffalo at the Jets. I'm very excited for this game. Suma, you are the Jets fan and Aaron Rodgers truther. Why don't you kick us off? What do you expect to see from this game, or frankly, what are you looking forward to?
I have a small lean towards Buffalo. I think this line should be closer to -3. I think that the Bills are a little bit underrated going to the season. If this game was played like in week 6 or 7, it might be a little bit of a different matchup, because going to week 1, the Jets will have their starting offensive linemen, like all 5 of them. But Dwayne Brown, 38-year-old, just came off the pup list like 2 weeks ago. Mekhi Becton is slowly getting into a groove. Again, he had like 28 to 30 preseason snaps each game. We don't really know what to expect from that tackle tandem. So Buffalo has a very decent defense on paper, strong secondary. Without Von Miller, they are not going to be a great pass rush team early in the season. Also, some of a kind of a weakness on their second linebacker spot next to Matt Milano. But even though we have talked so often about the Jets pass rush, I still think that Josh Allen deserves the benefit of the doubt. I mean, last year the Jets had his number like in both matchups, but I think both matchups were in the first game. I think he tore his UCL, and in the second game he played through that. So this time they will face a healthy Josh Allen and a Buffalo offense that I would expect to be a little bit more versatile with Dalton Kincaid, with James Cook in more of a full-time role. And I want to see that the Jets defense can really generate many key stops across 60 minutes of football. And on the other side, we have a little bit more downside variance going on with the Jets. It's like Aaron Rodgers, 40-year-old, first game with the Jets, behind that offensive line, which we don't know whether they will perform at an league average level. So I think Buffalo is a little bit underrated going to the season. I think they are actually a better team than they were last year prior to week 1. And last year, like, everyone had them as the number 1 Super Bowl contender. So I want to see that this Jets defense, which I think should be quite a good borderline top 10 team, I want to see how they compete against the Bills in week 1.
Cleve, what are you looking for in this game? Do you have anything that you're possibly looking to bet?
I was thinking of the under, but it's been hit so hard. It's like, at 47, once it dropped under 47, it's, you lose a key number there. And now it's down to 44.5 as we speak. Yeah. So clearly after what happened yesterday, a lot of the under money is coming in just generally, which is surprising. Usually Monday Night Football primetime game, you would see an over get hit, with late money, but it's kind of the opposite. I think it's going to be fun. Like, honestly, this is one of those few games I can sit and watch as a spectator, even if you don't have any money on it. I'm sure I'll take some prop here or there, but nothing substantial. And you can watch it as a spectator and not even as a gambler and be interested, because two good teams, the Aaron Rodgers factor. I just, to me, it's just like, I think back to Tom Brady in his first game in Tampa. Yeah. He looked awful against the Saints. He got a pick 6. He had multiple turnovers. Everybody was calling the demise of Tom Brady. we saw obviously not this, these guys are different levels, but Russ Wilson, when he went to Denver early on, Matt Ryan last year, like when these guys, are with teams forever and their first a couple games with a new team, even Brett Favre, I think when he went to the Jets, like, it's not easy. You go from a place you've been for over a decade, you're used to guys, and all of a sudden you've got to play with this brand new set of teammates. So it's, to think he's just going to step right in and light the world on fire, I would be surprised. So that's why I was thinking the under, and the Jets have done a good job with Josh Allen the last couple of years. So I think their scheme is devising a way to slow him down. So I think it's going to be a little lower scoring than we expect. I'm very interested just personally. I've got a ticket on Dalton Kincaid for Rookie of the Year offensively, and I'm really excited because I think he can add an element that they haven't had since Cole Beasley was their third down target, in kind of high leverage situations for Josh Allen. I think we can see something similar for Kincaid in the slot, and I think in the red zone. So, I want to see him do well. I think kind of a first touchdown look. I haven't even looked to see what his odds are, but he's a guy I would take a look at, and I'm curious to see how he performs, because I think he could be the missing piece at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's one of the three things I'm looking forward to. I want to see if Sauce is going to shadow Stephon Diggs everywhere, and if so, who Buffalo's number 2 option is going to become. I'm boring. I love trench play. I want to see how both these O-lines hold up, and I also want to see what version of Aaron Rodgers we get. And I also want to see who's going to get second place in the AFC East behind the Miami Dolphins. It's always good to scout the second best team in the division. Guys, thank you so much. I look forward to doing this next week. We'll be back tomorrow at 2:00 on Forward Progress with myself and Sharp Clark to break down some film, recap the Monday Nighter, and give you the first Thursday night preview. You don't want to miss it, so please subscribe. Hit the notifications bell so you don't miss any of the content. Also, smash the like button. Show some love to the creators taking their time to provide valuable insights. Of course, none of this would be possible without our sponsor, Pinnacle. Pinnacle's been around for 25 years. Trusted competitive odds. Bet smart. Bet Pinnacle. Must be 19 plus in Ontario. Please play responsibly. That's it for me. Thanks to Suma. Thanks to Cleve TA. Thanks to producer Jason. And thanks to you, the audience. Until next time.